Imagine being the King of England and Scotland and still living like you could be arrested at any moment, not by an enemy, not by an army, but by one letter, one sentence, one name that was never supposed to exist on paper. Because what if I told you the most famous Bible in the English language was commissioned under a king who, at night, did what he publicly called a sin during the day? And the proof is not gossip. It is handwriting, letters with the royal seal, letters where he does not call a man friend, but my child, my wife. Letters he signs with words you do not take back, your father and your husband. And this is where it gets dangerous, because at court, love is never just love. Love is access. Love is power. Love becomes a weapon in the hands of everyone watching. Here is the part people try to shrug off as harmless, as poetry, as the style of the time. Centuries later, inside a palace, they found something you cannot explain away with manners. A hidden passageway, bricked up and buried inside the woodwork, a route from the king's bedroom to the room of one man. And one detail about that passage does not fit the innocent explanation, because this story does not end with love. It ends with fear, with control, and with a deathbed whisper you cannot shake. What if James, in his final days, believed that one man did not just own him, but could also make him disappear? So here is the question that sticks once you have heard it. If even a king had to hide just to see someone, how dangerous was that love really? This is King James I, and this is the story of a man who left behind a Bible, but maybe above all, letters and a secret door. For centuries we have pretended the past was neat, as if kings could fold their desires away, close the lid, and act like it never existed. But every once in a while, one document slips out of the archives that does not sound like politics. It sounds like someone confessing. It sounds like someone slipping. It sounds like someone giving himself away. And then you realise the past was not better behaved. It was just better at hiding. Nowhere is that clearer than with the Scottish king who inherited England, commissioned the most famous Bible translation in history, and left behind letters that still feel uncomfortably close. Letters where he addresses a man with words you do not use for a minister, and definitely not for a normal friend. Letters where you can feel someone losing control, even with God at his side and an entire kingdom under his hand. Picture the opening scene. It is 1623, Whitehall Palace. You hear only the scratch of a quill and the soft slide of paper. The room smells like ink and wax because the court never stops writing, as if paper is the only thing keeping chaos contained. James is 60, his health is failing, but his hand steadies the moment he begins to write to the man who has consumed his thoughts for years, George Villiers, Duke of Buckingham. And James does not write like a ruler. James writes like a man who is finally allowed to be human. He says he loves Buckingham's person. He says he adores him in a way that is more than other men. And then he adds something you do not write by accident, not when you know letters get passed around, read and copied. He signs, "Your dear dad and husband." Stop there for a second. If this was only the style of the time, why does it read like exposure? The court knows it too. Ambassadors report it, courtiers whisper it, even his own son finds it humiliating. But James cannot or will not pretend he is afraid of gossip anymore, and that is exactly what makes it dangerous. Because at court, love is not private. Love becomes access. Love becomes influence. Love becomes jealousy. And jealousy is always the beginning of something filthy. To understand why James keeps taking this risk, you have to go back, not to Buckingham, but to the boy who never learned that closeness was safe. James becomes King of Scotland at 13 months old. His mother, Mary Queen of Scots, vanishes from his life. What is left are regents, factions and power games, adults who smile while they plan. A child learns warmth is temporary, and trusting people makes you stupid. A child raised like that grows up with one hunger that never dies. Not hunger for power, Because power is just a title on paper, hunger for someone who stays. Then, in 1579, James is 13, lonely, trapped in rituals and lessons, and Esme Stuart arrives from France. Older, charming, elegant, everything James is not. James clings like a drowning boy grabbing the first hand he feels, and almost immediately, titles, land, influence. Esme becomes Duke of Lennox, about as high as you can lift someone without giving them a crown. The court sees it instantly. This does not feel political. It feels personal, too personal. English spies report it like a national threat. Scottish lords write as if disaster is coming. They describe a king who cannot let his favourite go, too close, too often, too visible, and then they do something people only do when they are truly afraid. In 1582, they kidnap their own king. They hold him for months and demand one thing: Esme must go. James cries, writes, begs, but he is trapped. Eventually, they force him to sign. Esme leaves. James never sees him again. Esme later dies in France. Whether from illness or heartbreak, we do not know for certain. But James learns the lesson that scars him. Love is leverage. And he makes a decision, quietly, deep inside himself. No one will ever break me like that again. James grows older, smarter, more careful. He marries Anne of Denmark in 1589. The marriage works the way royal marriages are supposed to. Heirs, stability, a polished facade. But a court marriage is often policy with a smile. James's emotional warmth does not live in the official room. It lives in the room where he chooses who gets in. Then, 1603. Elizabeth I dies. England holds its breath. James arrives from Scotland as King of England. 2 kingdoms, 1 man. And that old hunger is still there. Now no one can kidnap him. Now no one can say no. And that is when it becomes truly dangerous. Because James does not just feel attachment anymore. He attaches power to it. Then Robert Carr appears. Young, handsome, the kind of presence a court reacts to. He falls during a tournament and breaks his leg. James does something revealing. He has Carr brought to his own private quarters to recover, not to a sick room, to the place almost no one gets to enter. And something grows there, not just a bond, a dependency. Carr rises fast, titles, land, money, but more importantly, access. Because if you want something from the king, you go through Carr. And the moment one man becomes the gate to the crown, the court becomes a marketplace. Want a job, you need Carr. Want a favour, you please Carr. Want to survive, you do not make Carr your enemy. James's letters to Carr turn personal, sometimes possessive. And that signature returns, like James is trying to nail down his role in Carr's life. Your dear dad and husband. Now here is the uncomfortable point. If James learned to be cautious after Esme, why does he write the kind of words that could destroy him all over again? Then, Frances Howard enters. Beautiful, ambitious, married, determined. She seeks an annulment. She wants Carr. James supports it, maybe to silence gossip, maybe because he wants Carr happy. But it spirals because one man stands in the way, Sir Thomas Overbury, Carr's advisor. He warns that this is dangerous, that it is a trap, and then it happens. Overbury is sent to the Tower, and then he dies. At first they call his death natural, but later the truth leaks out through trials and accusations, poisoning, murder. Suddenly, everyone understands the real rule of the court. Standing close to the king can make you rich, and it can also get you killed. Carr falls. James cannot protect him the way he wants to. The damage is too big. The court wants blood, and the court always gets something. You would think James would stop here, that he would finally realise desire is a weakness. But James never stops searching for warmth. And right when everyone expects him to calm down, George Villiers appears. Villiers is young, almost unreal looking, and not stupid. He has instinct, he has ambition, and he has something Carr did not, a mother who understands this is war. Mary. Villiers is cold and calculating. She knows that if her son becomes the favourite, the whole family rises. So she polishes him, trains him, and places him in the king's light at exactly the right moment, and it works. Villiers rises faster than is healthy. Gentleman of the Bedchamber, Knight, Earl, and finally Duke of Buckingham. Now James's letters become infamous. He calls Buckingham sweet child and wife. He signs again, your dear dad and husband. He writes about Buckingham's body and person in language that does not sound like politics. And the court sees it. Ambassadors write it down. They describe James kissing Buckingham in public. Buckingham is always at his side, at council, at church, at meals, hunting, and here is what that creates. Buckingham is not just beloved, he becomes the gate. And gatekeepers collect enemies faster than friends. Then James does not answer criticism with policy. He answers it with religion. He defends his love openly and compares it to Christ and John. The court swallows it, because what can you do? You cannot beat a king who declares his feelings holy. And then there is Apethorpe. Centuries later, during the restoration work, they find it, a hidden passage, bricked up, buried, a route between the king's rooms and the duke's chamber. Think slowly. Why build something like that? Because privacy does not exist, because eyes are everywhere, because being seen is dangerous, because there was something the king needed to do without anyone watching. And here is the detail that will not sit still. If it was harmless, if it was just practical, why was it bricked up and buried like evidence? Why hide it inside woodwork so thoroughly that you could walk past it for centuries and never know? That is not convenience, that is erasure. And when stone confirms a rumour, you start wondering how many other things vanished before they could become stone. James grows older, sicker, more vulnerable. Buckingham becomes everything at once: love, access, power, a filter. He controls who James sees, who speaks to him, who influences him. And in that final stage, the rumour is born that never dies. On his deathbed, James whispered something you cannot take back, as if his whole life, starting with Esme, had taught him one conclusion: that intimacy is dangerous. Was it true? Was it paranoia? Was it a dying king returning to his oldest lesson? That love can be used against you. We do not know for certain. But we do know this. After James dies, whispers become accusations, because Buckingham has enough enemies to make any story grow. Buckingham outlives James, but the country hates him. So much that when he is stabbed to death in 1628, people cheer. And when you rewind the whole story, you see something tragic and human. James was not a cartoon villain. He was a boy who learnt love could be taken from him, and a man who decided he would never be alone again. But the harder he held on, the more dangerous it became for everyone around him. Letters pulsing with desire, a court that turns everything into power, and a secret passage that says one thing clearly: even a king sometimes had to move in the dark. And that leaves the question that lingers. Do you think those letters tell us everything we need to know? Or do you think a court always buries more than it preserves, and we are only seeing the tip of what really happened? And that passageway in Apethorpe, was it practical, or was it the hardest proof James ever left behind? That he had to see someone in a way no one was allowed to witness? Write it in the comments. Was James a king who loved, or a king who destroyed himself? Because love and power could never stay separate. And that is why this story sticks. Not because of one letter, but because of what that letter made possible. Like and subscribe, because Crown Secrets is not done. The next revelation is even more uncomfortable than this one.